right, if members can please take their seats.
Thank you.
Maybe. We don't know who's going to be back.
I wasn't sure.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and call this confirmation hearing to order on Kent Kohlhase, who has been appointed as the Director of Project Management and Engineering. Let's go ahead and do introductions, starting this side of the table.
Crystal Kennedy.
Pete Peterson.
Meg Zalato.
Christopher Constant.
Suzanne LeGrand.
Felix Rivera.
Red Dyson.
All right, well, if you can go ahead and join us at the table, please. Yeah. And then we'll go ahead and start with just introducing yourself, and then we'll see if members have any questions.
Okay. Hi, my name's Kent Kohlhase. I'm glad to be here. If you want a little background, I can provide that. I've worked for the city since April 2013. I started out in private development. I was a private development manager, which involved working with private developers, homeowners to some degree, engineering consultants representing developers who wanted to build either commercial buildings that had some involvement in that, but more in the arena of subdivision of raw land and the development of roads and the other infrastructure that goes along with that. So I did that for 2.5 years, and then was fortunate to be hired by Jerry Hansen as the design section manager in project management and engineering, and that position supervises several design engineers. It manages the materials and soils testing lab, has survey and right-of-way acquisition, and I think those are the key elements of that job. And during my time in private development, I also worked occasionally as the acting building official during some vacancies there. I did that probably for a year to a year and a half on several different instances. And before that, I spent 20 years working for the U.S. Forest Service as an engineer, and my municipal experience actually started before I went back to college. Back in the late 80s, I worked in MOA street maintenance, plowing snow and paving and patching potholes and things like that. So I've got some experience with the operational side of that aspect as well.
Education?
Bachelor's degree from UAF, civil engineering. That was my third start back in college, and I made it through that time.
Took the Arctic engineering course?
I did, yes.
Ed Bryce?
No, it was, no, he had retired by the time.
Thank you so much. Any questions from members? Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Kent, thank you. One of the things I want to say is that you jumped right in already because you came out to Eagle River and talked about our traffic mitigation
Yes.
study out there. And so I really appreciate you coming out and kind of getting into the mix of what we think is kind of a convoluted mess right now because there's, well, too many moving parts with that whole project. But so my question in regard to that is, knowing that there are some different aspects to Eagle River compared to the Bowl or the Girdwood, how do you feel about trying to balance or manage some of those distinctions?
Well, with respect to the meeting, I definitely support, I think it was Michelle McNulty who really had the idea that we need to refocus onto Business Boulevard and the impacts to the businesses there, and make that project more than just a transportation project. You know, right now it's how do we make traffic flow, and to some degree it appears that it's neglected the impacts to local businesses. So I like Michelle's idea, and I support Michelle's idea. Michelle McNulty is the planning director, to refocus that effort and take a broader planning look at that corridor. Broadly, I recognize that there's differences in all the areas of town. The Anchorage Bowl, the Hillside, Eagle River, Girdwood all have different needs and desires. We were just chatting about street lighting. There's different thoughts on lighting in different areas, different parts of town. Our role in PM&E really is to implement the desires of the community councils, the adopted plans. So we have some influence on how a road looks, but really my goal as the department manager would be to make sure that we're implementing the goals that are defined in the 20-year plan, the short-term plans, the Eagle River district plans, things like that. So I don't know if that answers your question directly.
No, it's good, thank you, yeah, appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
I'll wait. Sure.
Yes, Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. In your experience, do you ever get involved in managing a public-private partnership for construction of projects?
Not directly. Probably I would say no. The closest I've come is we had quite a bit of work through the 8A program, the federal 8A program, which is a small and disadvantaged business program, and it was much more of a negotiated approach than a low bid approach, but not directly.
Yeah. Just for you all, I took advantage and picked his brain a little bit on this whole deal about forest fire and wildfire management. He's had some bit of a position to, to understand and think about those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Did you want to wait till the meeting, or do you want to do it now?
About which part?
Your question.
No, well, my question, I just realized after Ms. Kennedy's question, and you answered with, you want to make sure your projects do more than just move traffic. No, but then you explained, which I think you rightly explained, that it's not your job really to build in those functions, and that's really planning. That's really a different phase. Once it comes to you, it's more, let's build this thing.
Yes.
And so my question would be along the lines of, there's another neighborhood who long has experienced the abuse of the planning process to leave it high and dry as just a transportation corridor instead of a neighborhood. But I don't think that's a germane question to your conversation. So I think it's more along the lines of how they work.
I do have thoughts, if I may.
Please.
So you're exactly right. Some of the pre-work falls in planning and other departments. But I would say that I have a very strong working relationship with Michelle, with the folks in development services. I work very closely with Bob Dole. I was in his role for a while, street maintenance. So hopefully what I and the department could bring to the table is our collective experience, and we won't drive that decision. We would offer input to those goals, much like the discussion on business development.
And if I might, the challenge that the conversation is really hot about right now in the city is the Midtown Congestion and Relief Project, which in some ways high-graded the best ideas from the downtown, the Fairview corridor, which has been begging for relief from the bad policy planning and the bad implementation of transportation for 40 years, where you leave a neighborhood completely stranded and in decay because of uncertainty. And yet they took the best ideas and moved them to Midtown where they don't even want them. And now the neighborhood is under threat in downtown, being told, well, you can't have yours if they say no to theirs. And so this isn't your problem. This is our problem, but particularly my problem. And so I don't know where your role is, but know that there are a lot of big hot potatoes in the air right now when it comes to these projects. So
I have, I had the opportunity to attend some of the Midtown Congestion meetings recently, and I know that the planning department has some comments, and I will talk with Michelle.
yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Thank you. Want to know for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Weddleton. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just came out of a budget discussion and we looked at some of the impacts of reductions in the state budget. And I understand that your department is, the staff engineers are pretty much 100% billable to federal, state projects.
And local bond projects.
And local bond projects. So, do you see any things that you would like to do differently with the department in light of the fiscal situation? Do you think there's the correct balance of staff with term consultant contracts?
I think we do have the correct balance of staff, and I credit my predecessor, Jerry, a lot. Every year he would have the project managers take a look at the project management. There's several roles in managing a project. There's a project manager, there's a project administrator, there's the inspectors. Those are in-house resources. And we would take a look, we being the project managers, would take a look every year at the projected workload in the bond and grant projects when we were getting grants. And they've got a very good grasp on how many resources, how many PMs and PAs it takes to manage any given project or project workload. And the department has downsized project management. The PM positions by 50%. We're down from 4 to 2. We're down one project administrator, although we're looking at filling that. We're going to continue doing that assessment every year on the required staffing. We're down by a couple of inspectors from 3 or 4 years ago. And we have scaled back the amount of work we're funneling to we have 2 project management consultants, PTS and TBC, both of whom have done an excellent job for us, but we've scaled back the work we're passing to them pretty significantly over the past 2 years, I would say. So that's the bond side of the house, the project management, the design engineers, the tax-funded component of PM&E really is just watershed management. And that has stayed pretty status quo for the past few years. We're using one temporary position to help handle additional workload during the summer. We've been doing that for a few years and we'll probably continue doing that. So I think we're sized right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Constant.
So, interesting you mentioned watershed management, because that's another hot conversation we're having right now. It's stormwater utility. Do you imagine a role for PM&E within that conversation? And then the second part to that question is we've, generally, Mr. Dunbar, who couldn't be here, been in conversations with a number of parties to try to do at least a test flow out of Kohlhase to see how much water it would take to restore the river. And so probably, again, that might be AWW's bailiwick, but wonder if that's going to fall at all in your house, do you think?
The Kohlhase question, not at all. If there was some engineering we could provide support for, we'd be glad to do that, but I wouldn't be involved in that discussion. The stormwater utility, I'm aware of it. In my role as the design manager up until now, I wasn't directly involved in it. I think that PM&E directly would likely have not a huge role, other than, I'll set aside watershed management for a minute. PM&E directly, we build the projects that the city determines are the priorities. So we manage the design and construction. So if a storm drain project on Street X is funded by bonds, by state grants, or by some income from a future stormwater utility, we would treat them all the same, and we would design them according to our criteria and build them in the most cost-efficient way possible. So I'm not trying to skirt answering the question. With respect to watershed management, I know that Christy Bischofberger has been involved in some of the stormwater utility questions. Her role really would not be with the utility management, but be continuing to ensure that however we manage stormwater, we meet the state and federal permit requirements that we're under. So I don't want to sound like I'm not trying to answer your question, but I don't think that PM&E directly, as our role is defined, has a huge role in that process.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, thank you so much.
Thank
Look
you very
forward to
much.
Tuesday.